Cleopatra, have many revenge stories to tell. For my life was woven with betrayals, plots, and the necessity of striking back before others struck at me. And though the poets and Roman historians may cast me as a temptress, as a witch, as a queen who ensnared men with beauty, they forget that I was also a ruler born into the viper's nest of the Ptolemaic dynasty, where brothers and sisters did not merely squabble, but raised armies against one another. And survival itself demanded vengeance as both shield and sword. For when I first wore the crown of Egypt beside my brother Ptolemy XIII, I was but a girl. Yet he and his greedy advisers sought to cast me aside, to leave me voiceless, landless, and forgotten. And so I was forced into exile, wandering in Syria, plotting not only my return, but my vengeance. And the gods themselves sent me Julius Caesar, conqueror of Rome, into whose hands I wrapped my fate. And when he came to Alexandria, I had myself smuggled in to meet him, rolled within a carpet, so that when I emerged before him, he saw not a banished queen begging for pity, but a woman who claimed her throne. And together we waged the Alexandrian war against my treacherous brother. And when his army was broken, and he himself drowned like a rat in the Nile's waters, I tasted my first great revenge. For he who had sought to strip me of my birthright was swallowed by the very river of Egypt, leaving me to rule as queen in truth, and not as puppet. Yet vengeance, once learned, never ceases to whisper in the ear. And my own sister Arsinoe, who had raised herself up as rival queen and dared command troops against me, was captured and spared by Caesar at first, but I knew she would never cease to haunt me, never cease to plot. And so, years later, when I had bound my fate to Mark Antony, the great general of Rome, I demanded that he execute her upon the very steps of the temple of Artemis at Ephesus, that sacred place whose sanctity I shattered with blood. For no shrine, no Roman law, no memory of sisterhood could stand against the vengeance I owed her for the peril she had brought me. And her death was my triumph, though whispered of with shock even among those who knew how ruthless dynasties could be. And so I stood, crowned and terrible, knowing that in the silence left by her end, I had secured my throne. Yet fate is a trickster, and the dagger that slew Julius Caesar in Rome pierced also my plans. For when he was murdered by Brutus, Cassius, and their conspirators, I saw the Roman world torn into chaos, and once more vengeance stirred. For I had borne Caesar a son, Caesarion, rightful heir to his blood, and I dreamed he would rule beside me. But those who killed his father sought to erase all memory of his seed. And so I turned to the avengers of Caesar, to Mark Antony, his loyal friend and general, who sought to crush the assassins. And in binding myself to Antony, I bound myself also to Caesar's vengeance, so that every blow struck in the Roman civil wars carried my will as well. For when Antony triumphed at Philippi, it was as though the ghosts of Brutus and Cassius were laid beneath my feet, and Rome itself seemed to tremble beneath the tide of revenge. Yet what Rome calls politics, I knew also as survival. And when Octavian, Caesar's heir by adoption, turned his gaze against me and Antony, I knew his thirst was not only for power, but for humiliation. For he desired to drag me in chains through the streets of Rome, to make of me a trophy in his triumph. And I, Cleopatra, daughter of Isis, queen of Egypt, would never suffer such degradation. And so, when at Actium the tides of war turned against us, and Antony's strength faltered, and when at last he fell upon his own sword rather than be captured, I chose my own vengeance, for I denied Octavian his prize, denied him the spectacle of my body displayed before his jeering crowds, denied him the satisfaction of seeing Egypt's queen as slave, and instead I chose death by my own hand. Whether by asp's bite or by poison concealed in ointment, the tale matters less than the truth, which is that in dying I avenged myself upon Rome. I preserved my dignity, and I made my end not as prisoner, but as legend. And in this final act, my vengeance was not for a brother, not for a sister, not even for Caesar, but for myself, for Cleopatra, last of the Ptolemies, who had lived among treachery and answered with cunning, who had been cast down and risen greater, who had lost and yet in loss claimed victory. For though Octavian seized Egypt, though he slew my son Caesarion and claimed the world, still he could never parade me, never force me to bow, never strip me of the majesty with which I chose to meet death. And so my life became a chain of revenge, each link forged by betrayal and fire. And if I speak now across centuries, it is to say that revenge was not my shame, but my necessity, the iron with which I built my reign, the fire with which I burned my enemies, the crown I wore until the last breath passed from my lips.